welcome. Tonight we'll talk about business licensing reforms in Fiji, recently announced by the Honourable Minister for Industry, Trade and Tourism, Ms. Premila Kumar, who also joins us on the show this evening for the discussion. Good evening, ma'am, and it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me here.
So let's start off this discussion with the World Bank report, which of course sets up the context for this entire discussion. The report that was released last year on the ease of doing business in Fiji, where Fiji was ranked 102nd out of 190 countries, which I guess prompted this response for business licensing reforms. Let's talk about that report first, and what's your take on it?
Okay, ease of doing business ranking, which came out in the 2020 World Bank report. You are correct in saying that Fiji's ranking is 102, and previously we were 101, so there is a drop by one rank. And there are many reasons for that, because the way the World Bank does the ranking or considers the reform is quite different. It's not that we have done the reform and everything will get captured. They also take into consideration the awareness raising and how people perceived that response. So you may realize that in 2019 there were a number of initiatives that were rolled out. Right. But unfortunately it did not get captured. However, having said that, what we have seen that in fact the doing business ranking score for Fiji has improved. It has improved. Previously it was 0.4 and now it's even, doing business ranking score was 0.04, now it's 0.35, which means we are doing better. So some of these initiatives that we are undertaking at the moment is to improve the ease of doing business. And there are a number of initiatives that has taken place, and there are a number of initiatives that's being rolled out. Right. Because if you look at the ease of doing business report, there are 10 indicators through which they gauge. So besides 10 indicators, we also know when it comes to the assessment, when the questionnaires are given out, unfortunately, I would say that the number of response given for this assessment is always small. So that's not a good indicator. If you want a balanced reporting, or if you want to get the triangulation of information that you receive, you got to have a lot more questionnaire that should be applied. And this has been a drawback where Fiji government is talking to World Bank.
Right, so I mean, this was also discussed in some local media outlets as well, the fact that there's disappointment at the fact that the World Bank report doesn't completely encapsulate what's really happening in Fiji. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, we do. And it simply means that we have to talk to the World Bank team that does the assessment on a regular basis, which we are doing now, and we want to understand the criteria they're using, how they're doing the assessment, what is the sample size they are using, whether that sample size is relevant for a small country like Fiji. You can't just go to one company and get 5 people to fill in a form. It would be the view of that company. How about increasing the sample size? So this is where the discussion is.
So you mentioned that Fiji actually dropped by one place. Is that a substantial drop out of 190 countries?
Not really. If you look at the Pacific itself, comparing all other Pacific Island countries, we are the second best in the Pacific after Samoa. Other countries have dropped, like Vanuatu has dropped, Tonga has dropped in the ranking. Previously they were above 100, now they are below 102. But that's not what we should be using. The intention is to always create a conducive environment where we can attract foreign investors, and we can also encourage our local investors to invest.
So what was the ministry's takeaway from all of the things that were recommended by the World Bank?
So all the recommendations that came out, obviously, as I said, there are 10 indicators. So as a government, we looked at which indicators fall under which statutory organization or under which government body. And then based on that indicator, we teased it out to get finer details as to how we can achieve that particular target, that overall target. Like, for example, starting a business. That is one indicator. But starting a business, there are many other things that needs to happen so that business licensing is just one component. There are many other components, like business registration. So that's how we have teased it out, so that based on these targets, we'll be able to work towards achieving those targets. Because if we don't list those targets, it'll be lost within the indicator. So it's better to understand the indicator and the various targets that can be used to achieve that indicator.
So looking at the business license reforms, why bring it about now? Is it something that the ministry has been looking at for quite some time, or was it just in response to whatever economic indicators had helped to sort of push us into that particular zone where we had to drop down to that number, that ranking?
I would say it was one of the commitments that I made publicly, that we're going to look at the business licensing process. We will reform that, and I had to deliver that. So we worked towards it. But at the same time, there was a realization within the ministries that there is a need to reform the business licensing process. On a regular basis, when you talk to the business community, which we do, we consult them, they have been raising their concern that it's very cumbersome to obtain a business license. And also there was a discussion that micro and small businesses are treated the same way as bigger businesses. They pay the same fee. They also have to go through that same stringent requirement, like you have to meet OHS, NFA, all other requirements, statutory requirements. So was that a fair process? So all those factors were taken into consideration. But from the ministry's perspective, obviously, if you look at the Business Licensing Act, it is 1976. That's when this particular legislation was drawn up. And
So
obviously what was proposed then, and when you compare it now, a lot of changes had taken place, which was not in favor of businesses trying to set up the private sector trying to set up the businesses. Yeah.
So we'll take a look at some of those comparisons and what the old Act stipulated in comparison with some of the new reforms that have taken place. We'll discuss that when we come back from our break. Stay with us. So when we carry on the discussion with business licensing, you mentioned in the earlier segment that the Business Licensing Act in place 1976. So there's bound to be some provisions that are outdated. Could you highlight those?
Oh yes, Business Licensing Act, in fact, sets the procedure and the process businesses in Fiji needs to follow in order to get a business license. And the Business Licensing Authority is the municipal council. So 13 municipal councils are the place where businesses can obtain the business license. So the municipalities have become the Business Licensing Authority. And within the Business Licensing Act, there is a provision where municipalities can form bylaws to ensure that they deliver the service in an efficient manner. And that has become a problem now, because what has really happened, each municipalities came up with their own bylaws, and that created different levels of difficulty in different parts of Fiji. So it wasn't a standardized procedure. So what the different municipalities did were they came up with different business licensing categories and different requirements, different fee structure, application of the fee structure. So that became very, very confusing. So if there is one supermarket in Suva and the branches are in other municipalities, they noticed this, that the way the business license was being applied.
Right.
So that really led the ministry to consider all that and undertake this reform. And obviously, the other reason besides the Business Licensing Act was ease of doing business, and particularly the indicator that I was talking about, starting a business. The report, World Bank report, very clearly stated that it takes 40 days for the businesses to start their operation. And one of the main factor was that the businesses had to obtain the various approvals from different organizations, different regulatory bodies. And the whole process was very cumbersome. Like, for example, if you want to start a business, if you go to the municipal council, they want 8 things to be given to them. And if you look at those 8 requirements, first they ask for the business registration, then they're asking for the tax registration number, then they're asking if you're a foreign investor, you have to submit your foreign investment certificate. Then you have to provide the IDs, various IDs. And then they're also asking that, okay, if you are renting, then you have to submit a contract. Then they're asking for OHS certificate, NFA certificate, and building completion certificate. Now, these 8 requirements are not making sense at all. If you look at the first 2, business name registration and as well as tax registration, obviously most of the information, personal information, is already captured. Your ID and your details, all that is captured. So why are you asking again? If a municipality needs that information, it's not hard to get that information from this organization. And then if you look at the other requirements, like for example, renting, you have to submit a contract. I mean, that's a personal matter between 2 people. What has that got to do with the business licensing? So that became a problem. Then if you look at the other one is the completion certificate. That's most absurd. Because completion certificate, it's the municipalities that issue. So why are you asking for that information? You should have it. Right? And then OHS and NFA certificate. If you look at the Business Licensing Act, there is no requirement. It doesn't say that you cannot issue business license without these 2 things. There is no requirement. But what we have seen over the years, municipal councils became the gatekeepers for the various other, you can call it regulatory bodies. So they use the business license as a tool through which other regulatory bodies can get their laws checked. In other words, all the enforcement checks were made. And this is not how it should be. We want to move away from this kind of process, but we would like to now work on the risk-based approach where the businesses got to be made responsible. You start a business, you meet your compliance.
So if we look at the reforms that have been made, of course, you've told us in detail just how cumbersome and just how exhausting it could be for someone who is a potential business owner or would like to start up a new business. It could get quite exhausting and you just want to let go of it and not carry forth with the venture. What has this new business license process streamlined? If you could look at the process, what does it entail?
Okay, so when it came to the reform process, we looked at 3 areas. One is reduction in the procedures. Second one was reduction in time and reduction in cost. So we considered these 3 areas. Now, when it comes to reduction in procedures, we looked at businesses that want to start for the first time. And the second one was those businesses that are existing and they only want a renewal of the business license. So we categorized it into 2. Now, if you look at the startups, the reforms that we introduced are more to do with logical thinking. So if you want to start a business, first question we're going to ask you is whether it's high risk or low risk business. So if you want to start a shoe shop, So say, for example, in one of the complex, there was a shoe shop. They've closed their business. They wrapped it up. Somebody else wants to start a shoe shop. Now, how should that business be treated? So we said, okay, it's low risk, which simply means that we will require only two things for them to submit. What are those two things? Business name registration plus the TIN number.
So this applies to startups that are low risk, right?
Right.
We'll
And
let you-
also to all other businesses.
Right.
So in other words, we've reduced the requirements from 8 to just 2. These are the two things you have to submit.
We'll get into more detail on this discussion when we come back from our break. Stay with us. So before we went to break, in the last segment, we left off our discussion on the procedural aspect of making things easier. And we were discussing the differences that will be applied between startups and businesses that are already existing. So if you can explain a bit more on that.
So for any business that wants to get a business license, whether it's a startup or renewal, there are only two things that we need, which is the business name registration as well as the TIN number. And there is a form to be filled in, a very simple form. So once that is done, then we look at the startup into two categories, whether it's high risk or low risk. Low risk is basically shoe shop, you're starting a clothing, no issues, you can get on with it. So we are saying any business which is low risk, we will give you a business license and you can start your business, and within 6 months you can meet all other compliance. Right.
So sort of a leeway in between the time they issued the license and, of course, with the operations that they carry forth with.
That's right. So you're given 6 months to meet all other compliance. But we are also saying, like the example I gave, that there was an existing shoe shop and a new shoe shop is going to start at the same premises. So if this shoe shop is going to start in the same premises and they're not going to change the physical structure of the building, then they don't require any OHS, they don't require any NFA report. There is no need for that. However, OHS and NFA, under their legislation, they can visit the premises to see that these businesses are in compliance.
Right.
But then we have got other types of businesses which we call high-risk businesses, like food handling or handling of hazardous chemicals. In that situation, different types of licenses are required. So if you want to start a butcher shop or hair salon or a restaurant or a bar, you will need a health license. And if you want to start a business, say dealing with DVDs and CDs and whatnot, then this is where you need the copyright license. And obviously, if you want to start a liquor shop, you will need liquor license. So there are different types of licenses. We call it high risk. So in those cases, we are saying that, okay, we will give you the business license, but you cannot start the business, but you have to meet all the other requirements, right? So you've got to meet all the other requirements before you start the business. Because as I said, the Business Licensing Act doesn't say that all other statutory or what you call it, regulatory bodies compliance must be met before we issue a business license. So as I said, we are taking a risk-based approach where we're making the businesses responsible, where they have to be in compliance with the various laws that we have. And if they are not in compliance, say for example, we've given a business license and somebody has started operating the liquor shop and they have not met all the requirements. So in that case, municipal councils can cancel the business license, they can stop the business, and they have to meet all the requirements. They have to pay another set of fees before they'll be allowed to operate.
Now, if I were to make an application for a business license and I'm unsure whether my business qualifies as a low-risk business or a high-risk business, how do I go about checking or verifying that?
Okay, so this information is already available on BizFiji portal. It's already there, And besides that, they can go to the municipal councils. There is a list available, and they can have a discussion with the municipal council workers.
So by the sound of it, it looks like a lot of the procedures that have been removed were repetitive in the first place, or were not necessary in the first place. I mean, the example that you gave with the NFA example, if, for example, NFA is going to conduct a check anyways, why would that be, an initial requirement for someone to fulfill? So the onus, I guess, shifts to the businesses to make sure that they are compliant. But what about existing businesses? Is there a difference between the procedures that existing businesses have to go through just for renewal and startups?
So for existing business, again, what we are saying is that nothing has changed. You're still running the same business, same premises, same number of staff. You haven't changed anything within the building. Then why do you need to go through yearly OHS, yearly health, obtaining health certificate or NFA? We are saying you don't have to. Again, we are pushing the obligation on the businesses, saying that if you change the legal structure, you need to go to the company's office. If you change the physical structure of the premises, suppose you've increased it or you have shifted things around, so the structure of the building has changed. So you need to go to municipalities, OHS, NFA, all that. And if you are changing the nature of the business, obviously you need to go to the municipality to obtain the right business license. So again, we are pushing this to the businesses that you need to be in compliance.
And how long is this renewal valid for?
So the renewals will be given up to 3 years. So there is a provision, if a business wants a business license for 1 year, they can get it for 1 year. If they want it for 2 years, they can get it for 2 years. But maximum is 3 years.
Has there been any change in the fee structure for renewal or application of new business licenses?
Well, in terms of the fee structure, we have not touched the existing fee structure. We've decided not to do that. However, what we have really changed is, which will benefit the micro and small businesses. What we are saying that any startup which employs up to 3, the employees are up to 3 in number, so in that case, we will waiver the first year's business license. So they don't have to pay the business license in the first year. So there is a waiver on that. Right. However, for the micro businesses and small businesses, if they come for a business license renewal, they'll be given 50% discount if the employee number is up to 3. So again, that will benefit small and micro businesses. And at the same time, when for the startups, it's an opportunity for any person who wants to, who has an idea and want to turn that idea into a business proposal and want to try it out. So he or she is given 1 year where he or she doesn't have to pay any business licensing fee. However, they need to obtain a business license.
Interesting. We'll carry on the discussion when we come back from our break. Stay with us. So there were 3 aspects that we were looking at. We discussed procedures, we discussed cost in the last segment. Let's talk a bit about time. How much time should a person spend in trying to start up a business, and how much time should they spend in all the logistical aspects?
So as I said, the ease of doing business report highlighted it takes 40 days just to meet all other compliance, and then the municipalities will take another 5 days to issue a business license. Now, all that has been reduced to 48 hours. So within 2 days, municipalities will issue a business license, provided those 2 requirements are met. In terms of meeting the compliance of other regulatory bodies, this will now put pressure on the regulatory agencies to up their game. Because all this while, they were relying on municipalities to get the enforcement done. But now the pressure will be on various other agencies to ensure that they become more efficient and issue other requirements quickly. But do note, as I said, for low-risk business, they're given 6 months to meet the regulatory requirements. It's only for the high-risk business that they can't start without meeting these requirements.
We touched very lightly on home-based businesses in the previous segment, and we've seen quite a surge of this, especially online in the past couple of years, especially in the past 2 years. You've got people who have become single mothers, who've become redundant from work, and they're starting off with their own businesses from home, whether it be textile or it be catering. And in this particular instance, of course, they must be registered. What sort of conditions apply to them?
Previously, home-based businesses were not recognized. This is the first time we have looked at the Business Licensing Act, and through regulation, we are now recognizing home-based businesses. And what we are saying that yes, you can do businesses from home, but there are certain conditions that must be met. Now, including home-based business is a good thing from FERCA point of view. The tax office can collect their dues, and similarly from the individual point of view, if you want to start a business, it's much more convenient. Overhead cost will be lower, and you are doing your business from the comfort of your home. So there are a lot of plus points. So we considered all that, and then we came up with conditions. And what we are saying, there are a number of conditions that one has to meet. Like, for example, if you want to start a business from home, you must reside on that property. We're not saying you own that property, but you must reside on that property. And then the second requirement is that when it comes to the display signage, it should not be more than 1 square meter. So we are not encouraging big advertisement and big billboards on the premises. The third requirement is that you're not going to change the principal character of the place by changing the external appearance. In other words, the residential building must look like a home.
Residential building.
It should not look like commercial. But what is happening inside, we all know it's commercial. So that the other condition is that, if you're operating a business from home, it doesn't mean that you can display things outside, or you can have storage containers and other cabinets, etc., linked to your wall. You can't do all that because, as I said, the principal character of the place must remain the same. And the other requirement is that you cannot operate any mechanical or electrical tool which can cause nuisance in the neighborhood or can cause disturbance. Such businesses are not allowed.
What about the number of employees that a home-based business can have? What's the maximum?
Maximum is 3.
And why just 3?
Because again, OHS requirement and other requirement kicks in. So we are saying that 3 is a reasonable number. And again, we do not want to create that whole neighborhood suburb to look as if it has become a commercial area where lots of cars are coming in. There's a high foot traffic or more parking on the street side. We don't want to make it a high density commercial activity. So we want to keep it low key. And like you said, catering. You're doing inside your home, and then you put everything into your vehicle, and then you can take that for the delivery, etc. So such activities make sense. But obviously, you cannot say, hey, in my yard, I want to start a rental business. That is unacceptable.
I see.
Yeah.
So all of the things that we've talked about, these are changes that have been implemented. But in response, again, we go back to the World Bank report. Of course, there are other things that the ministry must also be planning, right? This isn't the only, the buck doesn't stop here.
Well, you're right. This is just phase 1 of the reform. Phase 2 of the reform, again, back to the business licensing process, would be the fee structure. how can we ensure that a supermarket is not charged various other types of fee? Like they have to pay liquor separately, or butcher, if they're operating a butcher, meat cutting section, they have to pay a separate fee. And recently I learned that under Ministry of Health requirement, even businesses have to pay packaging fee, which is most crazy. I mean, if you're doing a business, how on earth are you going to sell your produce or your goods without packaging it? So unnecessary, as I said, different agencies just came up with their own system without considering that they were actually suffocating the business.
So when we come back from our break into our final segment, we'll discuss some more of these future reforms by the ministry. Stay with us. So FBC News recently reported that there are 2 new e-services scheduled to come into effect over the next 2 years, and that is mainly related to obtaining construction permits as well as business application approval and payment. How will that work?
As you know, the government is, to be honest, we are in the digital age, right? Previously, internet was not seen as an essential service. Now it is. And as a government, we have made a decision that we will provide the services, whatever services, online so that it becomes more convenient for the public. And that's why you've seen that e-passport has been rolled out, and e-birth certificate and many other things have been rolled out. So with this particular project that we have, digital transformation, under that we have got 2 other aspects related to businesses. One is the construction permit application, which simply means that one can put in the plan online, and various other agencies must give approval or decline online, and the person who submits the plan is able to track and see online what is happening, where is the progress. So that will now reduce a lot of red tape, where if somebody had to put in the construction permit application, they had to make copies of plans and submit to different agencies, like Environment for ERA Assessment, Town and Country Planning, and many other agencies. So now all that is not required. It's all online. All other agencies can hook up, they can give the approval, and the applicant can see what is happening. So, and this is what's happening in the rest of the world. So learning from what's happening abroad, obviously we have signed up for the same system, because it reduces time and it reduces cost, it reduces frustration on the part of the applicant. We have seen previously when the person comes to lodge an application, then different systems are, different requirements are being told to them. So we have gone through the first phase. We have looked at all other agencies and what are their requirements. So we have sorted that out and we've put it on this portal.
Well, looking at the digitization of government services, this is www.bizfiji.com. There's many different aspects of your business that you can check out. Of course, you said the application form, fee schedule, high to low risk categorization. Just bringing it back very quickly to the business licenses itself, there's still public outcry every now and then whenever you have businesses that breach some OHS regulations, also NFA regulations. Could you comment on that matter and maybe just clarify who indeed is in charge or is supposed to oversee the suspension of business licenses?
Again, it goes back to the regulatory agencies. So, for example, if it's Ministry of Health and they are the ones who are issuing health certificate, they have to make sure that the business comply with the conditions stipulated, or they're in line with the law. So rather than waiting for the municipal councils to be the gatekeeper and check on all the compliance. With this reform, we are simply making the different regulatory agencies more responsible. So they need to be out and about, checking the businesses, making sure there is compliance. And of course, if the businesses are not complying, then the businesses should be shut down. They need to comply. Fines should be imposed, etc., etc. And that is with the regulatory bodies.
If we could just quickly look at e-commerce, it's seen quite a growth in leaps and bounds in the past few years. With e-commerce businesses, do they also need to apply for a license?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, e-commerce, I'm sure they're operating from home, right? So that will fall under home-based business. So they must have a business license.
So if we, I guess, look forward ahead 5 to 10 years, because your government has always maintained that in terms of the National Development Plan, these are longer term plans. So for your ministry as well, what can we expect, or what sort of reforms are you looking at a few years down the line, 5 to 10 years down the line?
Well, a number of reforms have already started, and 2 of those reforms we're just talking about. But then there are other reforms such as Investment Fiji. We want to undertake a major review of the Investment Act. As you know, the Foreign Investment Act that we have currently, it discriminates local investors from foreign investors. So everything is geared towards foreign investor. So in other words, we're rolling out our red carpet for foreign investor, but not for local investors. And we have seen that whenever there is any crisis within the country, it's the confidence is built by the local investors. They are the ones who remain here, they are the ones who are investing, and they are the ones who create this positive signal to the foreign investors that we are here doing business. And that triggers foreign investors to come on the show, come to Fiji and start businesses. So we got to recognize that. So we want to create a level playing field for both foreign and local investors. So we're going to get rid of the word foreign investment. We'll just treat all investors same.
As a final question for the show, when does this reform start off?
The work has already started. Work has already started. World Bank, IFC, they're helping the ministry in reforming the law. The consultation processes are taking place, and that is happening right now. So we do anticipate that the draft bill should be ready, say by mid of this year, or at least before the end of this year, so that we can take this bill to the Parliament for debate, for further consultation and its enactment.
Well, Minister, thank you so much for joining us today. It was certainly enlightening for us, and we hope it's been the same for our viewers as well. Thank you, and we hope to have you back someday soon.
Thank you for having me here.
And that's all we have for you tonight. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening.